All right, let's jump right into this explainer. You know, for over a century, the story of how human civilization actually began was treated as completely settled science. We thought we had it all figured out, right? Well, today, we are unpacking some seriously startling archaeological evidence from our source material that completely upends that accepted timeline. We're going to dig deep into the dirt, peer beneath rising oceans, and look at artifacts that literally just do not fit into traditional history books.
We've got a really structured expedition into unrecorded time today. We'll be covering shattering the accepted timeline, Ice Age drowned worlds, anomalies in clay, megacities without any kings, and finally, the deepest human past. Let's get right into it.
First up, Section 1, Shattering the Accepted Timeline. Time to break some rules.
So, the standard model we all learned in school goes pretty much like this. Humans figured out farming, then we built cities, and then we built grand monuments. Simple, linear progress. But over in southeastern Turkey, at a site called Göbekli Tepe, that paradigm is completely shifting. We are looking at hard evidence of hunter-gatherers, people with absolutely no domesticated crops, somehow coordinating the construction of the oldest monumental architecture on Earth. We're talking about massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing a whopping 20 tons, completely covered in intricate carvings of scorpions, vultures, and foxes. And get this, they pulled this off without farms, without the wheel, and without even pottery.
To really wrap your head around that staggering scale, let's think about the timeline. Göbekli Tepe was constructed roughly 11,600 years ago. That means Göbekli Tepe is actually older to the people who built Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids than those pyramids are to us today. It's just wild to think about. And what's genuinely unsettling? After using it for 1,600 years, the builders systematically and deliberately buried the entire complex beneath tons of soil and rubble. They hid it so perfectly that it sat completely undiscovered for 10 millennia.
And this massive timeline disruption isn't just a Middle Eastern phenomenon. Far over in North America, deep in Canada's Bluefish Caves, we found 24,000-year-old human butchery marks on mammoth and horse bones. This proves people were surviving extreme, brutal Ice Age conditions nearly 10,000 years earlier than the accepted Clovis first model ever allowed. I mean, these people didn't just magically pop into the freezing Yukon fully adapted out of nowhere. They had to have come from somewhere, bringing advanced knowledge and tools that were refined over countless generations.
Meanwhile, let's look along the Atlantic coast of Europe, where the timeline of human technological capability hits another massive roadblock. Around 4700 BCE, this deeply mysterious maritime culture of dolmen builders was moving utterly massive 150-ton capstones just to build intricate stone tombs. 150 tons! And they did this without wheels, without metal tools, and without any draft animals. Plus, they were navigating open seas, crossing the English Channel and the Bay of Biscay, spreading their megalithic architecture way faster than any purely land-based migration could possibly account for.
So the million-dollar question here is, how on earth did they do it? How are these massive, highly organized labor forces fed, housed, and directed without a single hallmark of traditional civilization? Because the sheer mathematics of moving a 150-ton stone block using nothing but human muscle and wooden rollers is incredibly brutal. You'd need hundreds of workers in perfect, sustained coordination. The fact they pulled this off tells us our ancestors were organizing on a massive, complex scale way before the invention of agriculture.
All right, moving into Section 2, Ice Age drowned worlds. Let's talk about our lost homelands.
During the last ice age, global sea levels were roughly 120 meters lower than they are today. That is a massive drop. Because of this, huge, vibrant tropical paradises like Sundaland, which was a landmass twice the size of India stretching across modern Southeast Asia, and the sprawling hunting plains of Doggerland in the North Sea were subjected to a slow, relentless drowning as the continental ice sheets rapidly melted. And for Doggerland, whatever the creeping, rising seas didn't claim, was totally wiped out by a massive underwater landslide called the Storga event around 6200 BCE, which sent absolutely devastating tsunamis crashing over whatever plains were left.
There's a really haunting reality to this, perfectly captured by the idea that villages abandoned in childhood would be miles beneath the sea by the time the survivors grew old. These people weren't necessarily destroyed overnight in one giant catastrophe. They literally had to watch their homelands slowly disappear within a single living memory. Today, they leave behind only scattered artifacts, like mammoth bones and antler points that modern fishing trawlers just happen to drag up from the seafloor, and quite possibly, the global flood myths we see shared by diverse cultures spanning everywhere from the Philippines all the way to Mesopotamia.
Let's jump over to Section 3, Anomalies in Clay, where ancient people completely defy our idea of linear progress.
Check this out. The Jomon people of ancient Japan created the world's absolute oldest known pottery, pressing these highly distinctive chord marks into wet clay all the way back around 14,500 BCE. But the truly mind-blowing part is their societal stability. They maintained a beautifully complex hunter-gatherer society for an unbelievable 13,000 years, and they did it without ever relying on agriculture. To put that massive stretch of time into perspective, our entire modern agricultural civilization, the whole shebang, from the first wheat fields to the smartphone in your pocket, has only been around for about 10,000 years. The Jomon clearly knew something profound about living in long-term balance with their environment that we just don't.
And over in the Balkans, the Vinca culture provides another stunning anomaly. Not only were they metallurgical pioneers who were smelting copper hundreds of years before anyone thought it was possible, but they also left behind over 700 distinct repeating symbols across thousands of clay artifacts. Lots of prominent researchers are now arguing that this might actually be a proto-writing system that predates Sumerian cuneiform by a full 2,000 years. If that holds up, it means literacy actually emerged in the Balkans long before it ever popped up in the Fertile Crescent. Incredible, right?
Okay, Section 4, Megacities without any kings. Who says you need a ruler?
Over in Turkey, dating way back to 7500 BCE, there was a densely packed honeycomb city called Çatalhöyük that housed up to 8,000 people, and it was brilliantly bizarre by modern standards. There were absolutely no streets or alleys, none. People just navigated the city by walking across the rooftops and climbing down ladders to get into their homes. And maybe the most shocking part, thousands of absolute social equals lived directly on top of their dead, literally burying their ancestors right beneath their sleeping platforms. This intensely vibrant city thrived for 2 whole millennia without a single shred of evidence for kings, palaces, or organized warfare.
Meanwhile, let's look at the Indus Valley Civilization. Around 3300 BCE, they were building massive, brilliantly grid-planned cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. We're talking standardized fired bricks, hyper-precise urban grids, private wells, and covered flushing sewers. They had public baths and a level of sophisticated sanitation infrastructure that quite literally blew 19th century European cities completely out of the water.
But here is where it gets truly baffling. This massive civilization thrived across an area even larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, yet we have found absolutely no royal monuments, no grand tombs, and no obvious kings. Nothing to indicate a traditional ruling class. And even though we've uncovered over 4,000 inscriptions using their beautiful, distinct script, to this very day, we cannot read a single word they left behind. Imagine a civilization of that massive magnitude, and they are just completely silent to us today.
All right, let's move into our final section, Section 5, the deepest human past, where we test the very limits of history. This next site has the entire global archaeological community locked in a seriously fierce, unresolved debate. This is Gunung Padang in Indonesia. Now, for centuries, everyone just thought it was a fairly standard megalithic terrace site. But recently, extensive subsurface investigations using ground-penetrating radar and core drilling have suggested something massive. The data hints that Gunung Padang might not actually be a natural hill at all, but rather a deeply buried, multi-layered, artificially constructed pyramid hidden right there beneath the thick jungle canopy.
And the real crux of this debate all comes down to the highly contested dates pulled from those deep core samples. The oldest date, 25,000 BCE. If that is actually verified, it would make Gunung Padang older than the end of the last ice age. It would predate Göbekli Tepe by a staggering 15,000 years. It implies that a deeply complex civilization existed in the tropical latitudes, entirely capable of coordinating immense labor and quarrying stone tens of thousands of years before anyone was supposed to be capable of doing anything like that.
So, could complex civilization actually be older than the last ice age? Well, critics are absolutely right to demand a lot more solid evidence to confirm if these deeper layers are genuinely man-made, rather than just heavily modified natural geology. But honestly, the very fact that serious scientists and geologists are out there investigating this and finding data that even supports the possibility represents a massive, undeniable crack in our accepted timeline. It forces us to ask, what if the Ice Age wasn't just an era of pure primitive survival, but instead a time when complex societies thrived in regions of the world that we haven't even properly mapped yet?
So what's the big takeaway from all this incredible evidence? From the intricately carved 20-ton pillars of Göbekli Tepe to the completely streetless megacity of Çatalhöyük, our sources heavily suggest one thing. We are constantly stumbling upon traces of human complexity that are much older, much grander, and way more mysterious than we ever previously thought. It really makes you wonder if our historical timeline isn't just missing a few pages, but missing entire massive chapters.
I want to leave you with this final, genuinely provocative thought. As we drag ancient antler points from the murky bottom of the North Sea and uncover hidden layers buried deep beneath Indonesian jungles, we have to face facts. The agricultural revolution absolutely wasn't the start of human brilliance. So, are we finally ready to ask the bold, paradigm-shattering questions that our ancestors might have deliberately left behind for us in the deep, unrecorded past? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.